Hey, welcome back to Mr. News Art Class. It's wonderful to see your smiling faces today. For our teacher and faculty Christmas party this year, we did a little paint party where we made paintings with ornaments hanging that had some kind of a word, whether it was a name or a Bible verse or some other meaningful word. And there were a few faculty members who were unable to make it. One or two of them requested that I record it and share a video so that they could make it on their own time. But because of the way that my supplies were set up for the actual paint party, I wasn't able to record it there. But I did come home and record it on my own time so that I could share it with them and with all of you. I know Christmas is already over, but there are some people out there who like to continue celebrating on into January. And even all through the winter, and some people even leave their Christmas decorations up all year round. The materials that you'll need in order to make this project are a pre-stretched canvas or canvas board. The canvas that I'm working on is 9 by 12, but you could do larger or smaller depending on what fits your needs. You'll also need a cup of water and an assortment of brushes. It's important to make sure that you have at least one flat and at least one round brush. A palette to keep your paints organized. And if you look closely at my palette here, you can see there's just a tiny bit of a fluid, slow dry medium in each well of this palette. This is totally optional. It's not necessary if you're working quickly. Because I'm making this underneath a whole bunch of bright lights, I've got it quite hot here. This just helps keep my brushes from getting too dry and keep my paint from getting too dry. My favorite brand of paint is Golden Heavy Body Acrylics. The binder is a very solid but flexible acrylic base that is archival in quality. It should last forever. They have a really high level of pigment in them. One reason I don't like to use the cheaper paints is because they don't have as much pigment in them, and when you mix them with other colors or mix them with a medium, they tend to lose their vibrancy very quickly. But these Golden brand heavy body acrylics keep their vibrancy very well. The colors that I'm using are primary magenta, permanent green light, titanium white, and Mars black. You'll also need some kind of a palette knife or spatula for mixing paints, and plenty of paper towels will be quite necessary as well. I'll leave links in the description for all of the supplies that I'm using here today. And those links below are affiliate links, which means that if you choose to buy any of these supplies, it does support the channel here. And I really appreciate any support that y'all give in any way. In order to get started with this, I'm going to mix a little bit of black and white together to make a gray for the hangers on the ornaments. We want to do the hanger on the ornaments first because they are going to be overlapped underneath the border. And when you're working with acrylic paints, since they dry really quickly, you can easily overlap things by painting from the background towards the front. I'm going to use a flat brush, and I'm going to lay each flat end on a different color. I'm going to put one flat end of the brush onto the gray paint and the other flat end of the brush onto the white paint, so that my brush has both gray and white on the same brush. And then I can pull a stroke lengthwise where it's bright on one side and gray on the other, and it just makes that hanger feel like got a light shining on one side. When you repeat this for all the other hangers, for the other different ornaments that are going to hang down, you want to make sure that you put the bright side, the white side, on the same side of all of them, so you have a consistent light source. You want the light to be coming in from one side, not both. To make the part of the hanger that wraps around the top of the ornament, what we're going to do is load the brush up completely with gray paint and then just dip one tiny little corner into the black. When we stroke that, we want to make the black on the bottom so that it looks like the light is shining down from above. Again, try to keep that consistent across all of your hangers. Make sure the black side is down. We're going to use one of our round brushes and load the tip of it with white paint and just make a little notch, just like you would do if you were drawing bubbles. You make a little notch in the top corner of it just to make it look like there's a light shining on it. And when you do that, you want to make sure it's on the same side as the white part of the line hanging down. And here's a little sample I made before I taught the class with the teachers. A few things I wanted to point out here from the sample. You see that there are lots of different snowflakey type things you can do in the border. I'm also going to show you a way to make more of like pine needles in the border so it looks like a Christmas tree with those ornaments hanging down. I'm going to go ahead and come down here and make the ornaments. I'm going to use my red to make the ornaments. The reason I'm going to use red to make my ornaments is because I'm going to have green in my border. What I like to do is make complementary colors. Red and green are complementary. They stand out very well when they're on the same page together. They have a lot of contrast. If I do too much green on my page, do green ornaments and a green border, then it would kind of feel a little muted, but by having the ornaments be very bright red and the border be green, it just helps to bring attention to both the border and the ornaments. Now my camera cut out here for just a little bit, but all it missed was that I put a little white notch on the top right corner of each of these ornaments the exact same way that I did on the hangers. And again, that just helps to get the illusion that there's a light shining on that top right side. Again, if you keep it consistent and have a consistent light source always shining from one side or one angle, it'll make the whole thing feel like everything belongs together. It really unifies the whole picture. And I also mixed a little bit of black and red together to make a little bit of a shadow on the bottom left of each one. That just helps increase the three-dimensional feel of it by having a little shadow on the bottom side. And here I'm mixing up a brown. If you're ever trying to paint a picture and you need a brown but you don't have one, you can easily make it by mixing complementary colors together. So if you mix blue and orange together, it'll make a brown. If you mix yellow and purple together, it'll make a brown. Or in this case, I'm mixing red and green together. It looks a little dark on the camera here. That's partly because of the exposure rate I have on the camera. But if it's too dark for you, you can mix a little white in to lighten it up. If it looks too purpley, add more red. And if it looks too maroony, add more green. And just keep adding a little bit of each at a time until you get the right mix. This brown is going to be the branches of our winter foliage at the top. And it's mostly going to be covered with green pine needles anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be kind of a dark brown. Use that brown to make a bunch of overlapping branches that hang down from the top of the page. And they shouldn't just come straight down. They should go at lots of different angles. They should curve a little bit. They shouldn't be quite straight. And if some of them kind of S-curve where they go in and then out and up and then down, that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly natural. We want nice, smooth, organic curves here. And the way that we're going to add the pine needles on each branch is we're going to grab the widest flat brush that we have, and we're going to load it completely with green paint. We'll line it up to where it's at about a 45-degree angle away from the brown branches, and just tap, tap, tap along as you go up the edge of a branch, all the way from tip to top. And you want to do this on both sides of each branch. And you can completely overlap them on top of each other. You don't have to worry about trying to mess around with what's in front, what's behind. Just go to town with it, and when it's all said and done, it'll all look like a big hodgepodge of branches. Next, we're going to use this red paint with a medium-sized round brush to just add a few little dots. I like to do them 3 at a time, so there's like little bunches of berries, and just add them kind of at whatever intervals you feel are necessary, wherever you feel like they belong. Try to space them out a little bit and don't do too many of them. And when you're done making all of your red berries, go back with a smaller round brush using white, just barely touch a little tiny white dot onto each red berry. That really just helps to make each one of those berries shine. Next, along the bottom, I'm going to show you how to make a curvy, wavy border like I had in the original sample I showed at the beginning of the video. The trick to getting these curves perfectly smooth is to have your brush parallel to the curve instead of perpendicular to it. And then you can also use that flat brush to fill the area in. Once your ornaments are dry, you can go back with a white paint and add the lettering on top of them. Here I just decided to spell out my last name, and I thought maybe I'd use some kind of fancy squiggly lettering just to make it look more festive. There's no wrong way to do your lettering. And along the bottom border where I'd have just the wavy green field, what I'm doing is I'm going back and adding some white dots, just a long row of white dots. And I ended up learning about halfway through that the back end of my paintbrush actually worked better for making these dots instead of the bristles. And that's it. Now I'm going to clean my brush off and put this aside for the night. Tomorrow, when it's dry, I'm going to come back and paint the edges of the canvas. Alright, so I let this dry overnight, and now all the paint on it is completely dry. What I'm going to do is paint the edges of the canvas. This canvas is about half an inch thick, half an inch deep, and I just want the edges around the canvas to have a nice solid color. I'm going to do red to complement the rest of the green border. So what I'm going to do here is put some blue painter's tape along all 4 sides. I'm putting this on the front so that the sides are empty, and this tape is just going to act as a barrier to prevent my red paint from accidentally covering up any part of what I've already painted. I'm using a pocket knife here to cut the corners perfectly square. I would normally use an X-Acto knife, but for some reason I can't find my X-Acto knife, and I always have a pocket knife handy, so I'm just using what I have available. Now, as you can see, I left about 1/4 of an inch of the front uncovered by this tape all the way around, maybe more like 1/8 of an inch. And that just comes from the curvature of the canvas wrapping around the wood frame. This particular canvas is wrapped around a frame that has a little bit of a beveled edge to it, so I just used that bevel as a guide. And this is going to help just to overlap any unclean edges that I have. Before I use the red paint, what I'm doing is going over the edges of the tape with what's called a clear gesso. Gesso is like a primer, and usually gesso is white, but this is a clear gesso, and what this does is it fills in any gaps that are underneath the tape so that my red paint won't slide under the tape. And I let that clear gesso dry for about maybe 10-15 minutes. I also zapped it with a hair dryer just to be sure. You could wait and let it dry overnight, but I think that's a little bit unnecessary. And now the last step is I'm just brushing red paint to cover the whole side along all 4 edges. Normally I would wait until it's dry before I peel this tape up, but I'm in a little bit of a hurry, so I'm going to go ahead and peel it off. If you peel it off while the paint is still wet, be super careful not to get that paint on your fingers and onto your canvas. If you smudge it onto something you've already painted, it's going to be really hard to fix. If you make one too and you want to share your picture, just leave a comment below with a link to your picture. I'd love to see it. You can still use the links below to purchase supplies, and feel free to share this video if you want to do this with a group of friends or with a company gathering, or even if it's just by yourself. And whether you're making one of these or not, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them for you. And if there's something different you'd like to see me make or have me teach you how to do, let me know, and I'll see what I can do for you.